I think I've been waiting all term to get to this wonderful movie. And I know out of my preparations for this course, I've been really excited about ways that I can teach this film. Call Me by Your Name is an incredible film from an exceptionally strong book. When we think about contemporary literature, most of us who have our backgrounds in non-contemporary literature will often take a rather snobby approach to a recently written novel. Call Me by Your Name was recommended to me by a writer friend. I found it just incredible. I found it believable. I certainly got the nuances to other famous love stories, which we'll talk about for sure. And it just really worked for me as a novel. I read it in anticipation of the release of the film, not really knowing what to expect. I had heard that the film version removed part 4 from the novel, from the original screenplay. There was a slight shift in location, a narrowing down of characters by very little. So I kind of went into it a little bit, not skeptical, but I didn't realize, of course, is that this really is a European film. And because of the seemingly Americanness to the publicity, I thought, a Hollywood film. But as I'll urge you all to do throughout the course of our study of this film, is to really search on YouTube for interviews with the exceptionally talented actors and our director. This director, like I've never met him, I love him. His interviews show his ability to remain passionate and artistic. But he also appears to be very real. And I think that's something that we find more in European films, European cultures in a lot of ways. So Luca Guadagnino is an exceptionally talented filmmaker. And you'll be tempted to go to interviews, which I still highly recommend, with Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer. Their interviews are, you watch them shift from so articulate to hilarious. And the more interviews that you will watch about this film as you prepare for your evaluation projects or as you'll study this with me, you're going to realize that this film was loved by everyone involved with it. And as a result, we have a love film, right? A film about desire, where desire functions as a discourse between two men who couldn't necessarily articulate everything that they really, really wanted to say. As a result, the film takes over, and the discourse of desire is actually represented through the cinematography, which I'll get to in a bit. So where I'd like to start, this is a great film. I'd like to believe I've only taught you great films this term, but right, with a couple of sections of desire in literature and film, I'm presuming not all of you will agree with me, and that's completely acceptable. The author himself, and I'd like to talk about André Aciman, who has this rather fortunate position at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, teaching comparative literature. Killed for his job, just putting that out there, right? And for those of you who did notice or will notice, we're gonna hope you watch this before you screen the movie, but I know many of you have probably seen it already. André Aciman makes a wonderful cameo in the film as the character of Munir. So it's super nice to kind of see him acting in this incredible production. He's an academic turned writer. He's written quite a bit in response to non-scholarly work. As many of you know from working with me this term, I'm an academic who has a novel manuscript as well as various other aspirations that deal with theater, acting, and film. But I think it's amazing that someone with such an esteemed position at such a top-notch American school has the ability to leave scholarly work and give us amazing novels. And I think this needs to be really reinforced here. Academic work, from working with students to designing courses to working on committees, can sometimes be very draining, and in many ways can sometimes almost silence the creative process. And it seems with Andre Aciman, this is just not the case, that this man has the ability to storytell in an incredible way. His construction of characters are just so incredibly real and so believable. There's a verisimilitude to Elio and Oliver and the supporting cast that exists in the written version, in the novel version rather. Written version could mean the screenplay, right? Which we'll get to too, or as well. So it's really important for us to know that we're looking at an academic who's shown us his incredible versatility and flexibility as a creative writer. Desire. As desire is really the focus of our course together this term, I'm gonna sort of shift my focus to Andre Aciman himself, who has shown us a desire to write beyond the scholarly mode, to write creatively, to create. And as a result, the desire that his characters embody in many ways could be suggested to mirror his desire to leave the conventional forms of scholarly work and what's expected of us when we research, write, and produce a scholarly essay or book, to go to a piece of fiction, a story, something that's character-driven opposed to argument-driven, where there's the desire to round up the principal characters and portray them with an incredible sense of love. Love. I think love is the most complete word that I could use in the teaching of this film. This film is about love. As you'll see with the interviews with the actors, hopefully those of you who go to said interviews, they speak about the organic connection that their characters share with one another. And the film portrays to us the fragility of the human experience, how love is something that we generally can't control. And the people with whom we connect, sometimes these connections could just be incredibly overwhelming, and other times not so rewarding. And in this film, we really get a chance to see what happens when love happens between two people who honestly connect and care about one another. And we've definitely seen this before this term. So thankfully, we're looking at the way that love grows out of friendship. But what we realized through the screening of the film is that love was always part of the desire for both these characters to really get to know one another. The prose of the novel itself is rich and dense, beautiful, truthful, and authentic. I feel that the filmmaker captures this in his incredible cinematography, his ability to edit, a little bit of montaging, and to really use panoramas and close-ups and shots that look like movie posters of love stories. And we'll certainly have a chance to look at these kinds of shots and the editing used as we discuss this film during our class time, where we work more face-to-face than a recorded lecture. What happens is that the characters in the novel, who are just so believable, become even more believable when we see a film version. They become larger than life in a lot of ways. They become the characters that they portray, and we fall in love with them the way they fall in love with one another. Romeo and Juliet, we fall in love with both these characters, and they are, in my understanding, not quite as complete as Oliver and Elio, as they come from a different time. Oliver and Elio are highly constructed, and as a result, they're exceptionally successful. So for those of you who do like to read, if you enjoyed this film, I definitely recommend having a look at the book as well. You might really like it, and there is a sequel to it. Now, Luca Guadagnino's vision reveals an incredible accomplishment. And in the interviews that I watched with these characters and this wonderful director, it appeared that none of them were actually really prepared for the kind of success that happened with the release of this film. And there was a delay with the release, which I'll get to as well. It was years in the making. The director's an artist. You see this when he speaks. I was so charmed and impressed by really hearing about what he wanted this film to be and the methodology he used to get the actors to become their characters. The film functions, as I said, as kinds of postcards, visual ones that move in moving pictures, as the expression goes, where each shot looks like a painting almost, and we'll see a very painting-like quality at different times within the film. Believe it or not, this film, and the actors attest to this, explain that the budget and the feel was more like an indie film. There was the desire to produce the human experience above a Hollywood blockbuster. It wasn't shot in a studio, it was shot in location. James Ivory wrote the script, and he shifted the time frame of the novel, working with the director, if I'm not mistaken, from 1987 to 1983. In an interview, the director explains that he wanted to have this last vestige of freedom before things would have shifted to Thatcher and Reagan in his socio-political understanding. And as a result, as I've mentioned earlier, there is a shifting of the ending. I had trouble with this when I saw it in the theater. I felt like, oh, where's the rest of my book? And it was only by watching how much Andre Aciman loved what James Ivory did with the novel to turn it into a screenplay. He actually, in an interview, says that he felt that this screenplay, this edit, this change of the ending, closed the story better than he did in the novel. I think that's kind of impressive for a writer to actually say. This cast is star-studded, from European talents like Amira Kazar to Armie Hammer, who is really up and coming at the point in time of the casting and filming. Armie supposedly had rejected a series of Hollywood roles because he wanted to work with the more organic and earthy and grassroots kind of indie film. So he was definitely very, very happy to be part of this project. Luca met Timothée Chalamet, I think it was 3 years before the filming began. So if Timothée was like 20-ish, I'm guessing he might have been a senior still in high school. And he did go to the Performing Arts School, LaGuardia High. For my musical theater friends, that's the school where fame takes place, school that changed my life as a teenager. I kept thinking, wow, I want to go there. And I never did think I might teach a film, or one of the actors actually had gone there. He was fortunate. He grew up in, we've got lots of he's going on, don't we? And as I correct the use of pronouns in your essays, I'm going to correct myself. Timmy, as he likes to be called, my horse's name is Timmy, so it's kind of funny that I say that, but Timmy explains in an interview that he's from a showbiz family and that he had access to the kinds of auditions that places like New York and Los Angeles only have to offer. So he started acting younger. He certainly had smaller roles. Advertising, I think he had mentioned a Cheetos commercial that he didn't really, it was like, yeah, whatever, this is what I really want to do. And Luca met him. Timmy's agent either knew Luca or someone else on board with the planning of the film. And Timmy's file was sent to Luca, and they met, if I'm not mistaken, over the equivalent of coffee, 3 years before the filming. Obviously, Luca never forgot this young man, and maybe he wanted him to age, right? Just a little bit, just grow up just a bit, visually, to not appear more than 10 years younger than Army, which I don't think he does. I mean, the film plays with the visuals, right, of the grown man who's a grad student, so we're going to presume anywhere between 25 and 27, and a 17-year-old. We actually know Elio's age. And there is this oppositional pull that makes for a very, very beautiful picture, right? And one is brunette, the other one is kind of dirty blondish. There's a few things working between these two actors that allow the characters they're portraying to mirror off of each other and thus create an incredible whole. In one funny interview, I love this one, it popped up out of nowhere. Timmy explains that he got razor burn from the makeout scenes with Army, and I thought, you know, that's hilarious because that really is something. I think he mentioned that on the Ellen Show, if I'm not mistaken. That women, straight women rather, and gay men only really understand. And if you look at the film, there is a scene where there's almost like a pinkness to his skin, and I'm wondering if it's a little bit of a reaction to Army's, quote, manhood, end quote. What we have with this beautiful casting and incredible connection between the characters is that they remain believable. Armie Hammer showed up a few weeks after Timothée Chalamet, and Timmy was in Italy learning Italian and practicing guitar and taking piano lessons. Supposedly he already played piano. Armie was thrilled to meet him. Both of these actors in the interviews that you will see explain how much they really, really got along as human beings, but as well, they were kind of like two Americans in rural Italy, or small town Italy, not quite rural. And they did a lot of the things that Oliver and Elio do. They go to cafes or they bike ride all over town. And they said they had dinners together, they watched movies and TV together, and they really, really connected. And so their friendship certainly comes through as legitimate. Oliver is referred to early on as the movie star, and he really looks it. But it's interesting, as we'll debate in class, who the object and subject of desires might be within this film. Do they oscillate? Is Oliver Elio's beloved, or is it the other way around? And is there this wonderful balance between the characters? We end up with a film that, much like Romeo and Juliet, deals with youth and desire, because the novel and the film appear to be principally told through the character of Elio. Young love appears to be in the foreground. And this is the most important within this film. We get to look at what it might be like to be young and have such incredible feelings, to have such overwhelmingly strong feelings for someone older. I think that Timmy's portrayal of Elio makes us instantly believe the character's restlessness, his deep-seated desire to know Oliver more. And as a result, we end up with a Socratic arrangement of desire, not uncommon in pre-liberation gay male literature. So we have the older teacher and the younger student, but as we'll see with the first kiss, Elio is sexually ripe in this film. He, whether it be with his female love interest, Marcia, or Oliver, right up until Oliver and Elio actually couple, it appears that Timmy's character is capable of taking the lead, overwhelmed with passion, overwhelmed by his feelings. There's an instant chemistry that exists on the set. We get it, we believe it. there's a delay for these characters to come together. And then it's delayed even further, right? That by the time Elio has the ability to confront or attempt to confront Oliver about his feelings at the war monument and the piazza, Oliver silences him and says, "We've done nothing to be ashamed of." Or does he say that a little later? He says it at some point in there. And the construction of shame as a problematic yet very real association, emotion, reality in the gay male experience is integral. Oliver doesn't want to be ashamed. He's also in an awkward position as the graduate student, and there is the age difference. So we've kind of got these things all working at the same time with the characters, but their love is delayed and their friendship really blossoms into love. In other words, it appears that there would be no way for them to become closer as friends without becoming lovers. They're simply too much going on between the characters. Now, how did the director achieve this? Through the location itself, through the characters and the development of the characters, through friendship, through a clear dedication to the work. The actors will also tell you very funny stories about rehearsal where they really had to practice making out, which I guess makes sense, as both these men live heterosexual lives. So how would they know how to kiss as gay men? And it's very believable on set, by and large. And you really see it. And this is Luca and his organic shooting. I feel bad that I called the director by his first name. But this really is his incredible shooting. So Luca's shooting, I've decided, you know what, they're all gonna be on a first name basis now, really helps the viewer see the desperation is the wrong word, the intensity of desire that exists between the characters. The director in an interview also explains his love for editing. He explains shooting is pain and that editing becomes a love affair, this creation of art. So for those of you who go on into film studies and continue your film majoring, you might keep this in mind and realize that shooting is really just one part of the picture, but what goes on behind the scenes in the editing will really complete the project itself as art. How does a film move from just a film to art? How does it move from a movie to art? This film, much like the three I surveyed so far, these are artistic endeavors, most definitely. Are they artistic because they come from great books? Probably in part, but they're artistic because of the creative vision behind them and the team and the staff and of course the actors as well. What happened with the end product? I don't know how the actors, when they were interviewed, didn't cry when they relayed the information. There was a delay between, I think, Cannes and then the wider release. So the film came out in 2017, but didn't really hit theaters until December 2017, January 2018. And a huge warm response at Sundance, supposedly at the New York Film Festival, right? And I was told a very stoic affair, very professional. When the film ended, there was a 10-minute standing ovation. And Luca and Timmy and Army were there. Imagine how you feel as accomplished director or up and coming big name actor or, almost a nobody in the acting world. Timmy was basically catapulted into superstardom after this. And in one interview I saw, he talks about getting paparazzi for the first time. And I thought, must have happened about 1 million times after that for sure. So the film, even before its release, anticipates itself as a cult classic. It's a treat to teach. It's an academic gift, I think, as a film. I wouldn't call the novel an academic gift, but it's an incredible novel. But the film, right, to teach to film majors or students who want to go into acting especially, we've got so much that we're going to be able to discuss together. And I hope that you'll tell me why you think this film was so successful upon release and is a cult classic now. Little semi-spoilers, but with no details. So you can pause here if you'd like to, if you're like, I don't want Brian moving forward. That's totally fine. And we're going to think about some of the scenes that really make this film happen. For me, it's the dusk scene where there's a canopy of trees and a step, and Elio's here, trees, frame, and Mafalda's coming through, and Elio asks, you know, buonasera Mafalda, dove, scusi, dove Oliver? And she basically says she doesn't know. And I think The Mysteries of Love is playing, so it's really melancholic, right? Like the guitar strings are pulling on your heart. And there's a montage of Elio thinking about Oliver, and we realize how much he's already fallen for him. This kind of montage will repeat itself at the end of the film when the characters are alone together on their long weekend right before Oliver flies home. And the two balcony scenes, like you need your box of Kleenex, right? There's this scene where, and it's interesting how humor plays against it, right? At a certain point, Elio's sitting and he's trying to write Oliver letters, and he keeps thinking, you hear him thinking to himself, and he says, God, I'm such a pussy. And it's hilarious, and he's making fun of himself, and finally we see him leave, you know, slip a note by Oliver's door. And then Elio receives a note from Oliver that says, grow up, I'll see you at midnight. And Elio spins, right? We all know what it's like to feel that way, or hopefully you guys will. It's a wonderful feeling. And he spins, right? He can't believe it's gonna happen. And then when it does happen, the first balcony scene, Elio sees Oliver on the balcony and he goes out, or the gallery really, it's more than just a balcony. It's this big gallery, right? These villas, unlike our flats, which would need air conditioning to cool off. These places had porticos and the equivalent, where you know, walls would open into window space for the very warm weather, far before the age of air conditioning, and far more economical in Europe, where hydro is exceptionally expensive. So Elio goes out, and there's an anticipation by the viewer, and Oliver's hand is on the railing, and then Elio puts his hand there, and then Oliver places his hand just on the corner of Elio's hand, and his thumb Oliver's thumb rubs Elio's hand, and my heart drops, right? It's just like, oh my God. And Elio confesses that he's really nervous. And the second balcony scene, which I adore, is set, but you can't really see the balcony. The characters are sitting. So Oliver's, if I'm not mistaken, he's leaning back and Elio's leaning forward. And they have this wonderful conversation about missed time and missed signals. And Elio at one point drops his head down into Oliver's chest, and it's just, I don't know if the director ever sees my teaching prep, my recorded lecture for this. Thank you for such a beautiful scene. Thank you for such an amazing film. This scene is just stunning. And the third scene, which really, really does it for me, is, believe it or not the peach scene. I had a lot of trouble with that. I came from a very Edwardian-like household. But it's after, when Elio breaks down and Oliver stops, you know, bugging him and holds him, he realizes how much Elio is hurting. And there's this visceral, guttural gasp that comes from Elio as he's clinging to Oliver, and Oliver is holding him. And he says, I don't want you to go. And it's at this point we see the intensity of the love that they share. And of course, their goodbye scene is very beautifully done. So I look forward to your comments and questions. This lecturette is a little longer than a lecturette. It's a bit of a lecture, so I'm going to end it. And I'll try and upload another one that looks at themes and main ideas. And then, of course, a study question, a guided review. So I look forward to all of your comments. And I'm really excited about teaching this film to you in class. Thank you for listening.